Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. So let's continue with my critique of Garrett's videos. The next topic on his list is
3/4 of all murder victims are male. Depending on the year in question, men usually make up approximately 77 to 79% of murder victims. In my experience of MRAs bringing up this point, no purported reason is given. If anyone does know a popular proposed cause for this among the MRM, let me know in the comments.
Actually, it's a really easy question to answer. It's because of fear-mongering like this.
Women, if you want to be safe, stay at home. Except that you're more likely to be killed at home by someone who claims they love you. So don't stay at home. Make sure you don't have a boyfriend because he's the most likely person to kill you. But don't go out without your boyfriend because you need someone to protect you. Don't show too much skin or laugh too loud or dance too much. But come on, love, give us a smile. Carry your keys and your phone at all times and make sure you run far enough to burn all of those calories. But don't do it in public, and for God's sake, don't run in shorts. That's just asking for trouble. Public transport is dangerous, but so are taxis and walking and driving on your own. And did I mention that staying at home is really risky? So don't do any of those things, okay? Men, just carry on as you were. This is not your problem, okay?
Now, I'm not suggesting that women don't have anything to worry about when walking alone late at night. Obviously, they do. They could be raped, they could be mugged, they could be physically assaulted, they could be murdered. The thing is that these things could happen also to men. Now, maybe men have less of a chance of being raped by a stranger while walking home, but they do have a higher chance of being physically harmed, physically assaulted, or even killed, as the statistics clearly show. But for some reason, feminists like to ignore this. They like to pretend that it's only women who are in danger, and somehow this is a male privilege. This is once again the feminist technique of only looking at half the data and concluding that these issues only affect women and not men at all. And men are perfectly safe because, you know, we're all privileged kings or such bullshit. And we see this over and over and over again in feminist circles. For example, from BuzzFeed, 29 things women avoid doing because we fear for our safety. And we come down to number 7, run alone at night because we fear attackers. Because men would never ever be attacked late at night. It just would never happen, obviously. Or we could look at the Thought Catalogue article, 22 things women worry about on a daily basis that men never have to think about. Number 1 on the list, when walking somewhere alone at night, spending the entire walk thinking about every possible scenario of what could happen to you and planning all possible escape routes, even if you're just walking through a parking lot to your car. Yes, because once again, apparently men are immune from violence, or possibly violence against men just doesn't count. It only counts when it happens to a woman, apparently. And to think that men walking home late at night never think about the possibility of being injured or killed by, strangers or a group of strangers is ludicrous. But this never crosses the mind of many feminists for some reason. And these articles, these type of articles, are fairly common. We see them all over the place. For example, from Mamma Mia, 2 women were attacked in Melbourne last weekend and I'm scared. Yep, well, guess what? Men get attacked in Melbourne every week, but apparently that doesn't count. Here's another one. Things men don't have to worry about that women do. Number 5, walking home alone at night. Yes, because it just never happens. Men never get killed or physically assaulted while walking home late at night. It's just, it's never happened in the history of mankind. And yet another article, 10 things women worry about that men don't have to. Number 8, walking home alone at night. Of course, there are certain neighbourhoods where no one would want to be alone at night. but every dark street is a potential threat to a woman as she walks home alone at night. Yeah, because men have never ever been assaulted or killed while walking home late at night. It's never happened. So the reason why we bring this up, Garrett, is because of this feminist fear-mongering where only threats to women, only danger to women seems to count. And the reality where men are more likely to be physically harmed or killed, it doesn't cross their mind. In fact, they claim that it's something we don't have to worry about. They claim that it's a non-issue. And you have to wonder why. Is it because they just don't care that men are being killed? That a man being killed doesn't count? And the funny thing is, we hear quite often from feminists when this is brought up, when men are in more danger of being attacked or killed walking home late at night, for example. When we bring this up, we often hear, but that's men doing it to other men. Apparently, crime only counts when it's one gender doing it to another. Or, to be more specific, when it's a man doing it to a woman. For some reason, if someone of the same gender commits a crime against someone else of the same gender, it doesn't count. I still haven't figured out exactly why that is. That's always seemed a bit strange to me. I mean, dead is dead, right? Does it really matter if you were stabbed by a woman or a man? The result is the same. You're dead. So yeah, it's this type of bullshit fear-mongering, which is why we bring up the actual facts. Next.
That aside, I'll now get into my argument for the why. Many categories of murder victims are roughly equally representative of both genders, like mass shooting victims, serial and spree killer victims, and victims of acts of terrorism. Of the categories that have mostly male victims, perhaps the most prevalent are victims of crime motivated by an affiliation to a criminal enterprise that is primarily motivated by economic reward. Organized crime and all forms of financially motivated criminal networks are endemic in all human societies. This form of crime exists everywhere humans are located, and throughout history, criminal groups operating in the pursuit of financial gain have had and most certainly still have a strong tendency towards violence. We need to look at murder committed by criminal organizations and networks that are primarily motivated by economic reward. Murder victims are usually members of those crime groups themselves, and as such are almost always male, since organized crime is an overwhelmingly male enterprise. Of those that are not criminals themselves, most of the rest are also male, including corrupt businessmen, victims of extortion who end up dead, and kidnapping victims who end up dead. These three groups are mostly male. I should also point out that organized crime groups tend to actively avoid the killing of women, though they will do so without hesitation in certain circumstances, like women involved in organized crime and the wives of informants, due to what they might know.
Okay, so Garrett's argument is because most organised crime and crime gangs are male, and their victims of murder are male. That somehow accounts for the 3/4 of murder victims being male. Now, for this to be any kind of legitimate argument, that would mean that, 50% of murder victims would have to be due to gang and crime organisation murders. And of course the remaining 50% would be 25 female and 25% male, which isn't gang or criminal organisation related. So let me have a look at Garrett's own statistics, which he links to. So this is intentional homicide victims killed by gangs or organised criminal groups as percentage of total homicide victims by country. So let's start with North America, and the first one on the list is Canada. So Canada is surprisingly high. It's 34.4% of homicide victims are due to gangs or organised criminal groups. I actually find that a bit surprising. I'm guessing the murder rate in Canada overall is fairly low, though. So I'm guessing that most, a large percentage of murders are due to criminal organisations. America is a little bit different, though. Now, I actually expect that the American number to be much higher due to, we constantly see gang murders in certain cities in particular. But that's only 4.6%. I'm using the latest year's figures, by the way. So for Canada and America, that's 2011. So even though Canada is fairly high with 34.4, it's still not 50%, and America is nowhere near 50%. So if we come down to Australia and New Zealand, the latest year's figures are from 2009, and it's 1.9%. So let's give Garrett the best case scenario and say that 75% of homicide murders are male, 3/4, as he said at the start. I know in some years that can be higher, but let's just say 75% or 3/4. It's a nice easy number to work with. So if we take off the highest number, let's say from Canada. Oh, by the way, I want to look at the UK figures, but they weren't here. So if we look at the highest figures, which were for Canada, which is 34.4, we've got 40.6%. Even if we assume that all the victims of gang and organised crime homicides are male, and to be fair, most of them probably are, but even if we to assume that all of them are male, and we take the 34.4 from 75, that leaves us with 40.6. So that would be 40.6% male victims compared to 25% female victims. So males are still far in front, and that's the best case scenario with Canada. With America, we've still got over 70% of victims being male, even if we take into account gangs and organised crime. And it's exactly the same with Australia and New Zealand. If we take 1.9% off 75%, it barely makes a difference. So I have no doubt that Garrett is correct, that in the sense that most victims of organised crime and crime gangs are in fact male. But these figures are relatively small compared to the overall homicide rate. So I don't really think that accounts for the difference.
Secondly, we need to examine crime entirely or at least mostly unrelated to the pursuance of economic reward. One of the major categories of murders in this type of crime is that resulting from intimate partner violence. As is probably obvious to all of you, these are mostly female. However, this doesn't do much at all to counterbalance the murder statistics, because the number of economically motivated murder victims significantly outweigh those of domestic violence murder victims in most countries of the world. Of those in which it is the other way around, the female murder rate is higher than the male murder rate. It should be obvious to everyone that women are not to blame for this, considering 90% of murderers are male.
Who said that women are to blame for it? I don't know of any MRA who is saying that women are to blame for the fact that 3/4 of murders are male. And we're not really blaming feminists either. Not everything is one gender doing something to another gender. I know that's the way feminist ideology has things set up, where you can't actually see a problem unless it is gender A doing something to gender B. But sometimes, Garrett, sometimes it's a societal issue, and society is made up of both males and females. Now, one of the biggest things affecting men's rights is other men. The straw man that you guys come up with, that we're blaming everything on women, is absolute bullshit. As for the 90% of murderers are male comment, I think what you meant was 90% of convicted murderers are male. But I'll get into that more in my next response to you, my next video, in which I will tackle your claims about the sentencing gap. I really don't want to go into it now though, because I have other things in this video to get through. So, on that note, next. So Garrett finishes up this section with a real problem: prevalence and nature of crime motivated by economic reward. Part of it is, Garrett. Part of it is. It's under 2% in Australia. It's under 5% in America, according to your own figures. It doesn't account for all crime, though. Well, all murder, I should say. But once again, the reason why we bring it up is because to many feminists, male victims are invisible. They just don't exist. Something happens to women, it is a major issue. Something happens to men, it's pretty much ignored. And this is a pretty widespread thing. If you look back a couple of years ago now, with Boko Haram in Africa, they went into classrooms and slaughtered males. They hacked them to death with machetes and burnt some of them alive. And these were school kids, children, male children. And there was barely any mention of it in Western media. A couple of months later, they kidnapped some girls, and it was everywhere in the media. Suddenly, it's a major issue. No one seemed to really give a shit when they were doing it to the boys. But once the girls were kidnapped, you know, the president's behind it, and newspapers are constantly talking about it. Now, I'm not saying that they shouldn't talk about the girls being kidnapped. Of course they should. But my question is, where was the fucking concern for the boys? I think that's a legitimate question to ask, Garrett.
This is about prison conditions in most countries of the world being unnecessarily counterproductively bad, which leads to things like high recidivism rates, prisoner suicide, prison rape, and high inmate drug addiction rates. I don't have much to say about this one. It's definitely a serious problem, and it does disproportionately affect men. Activism is certainly justified here. The only thing I'll point out is that this problem has been around a lot longer than feminism, and women in general don't have a whole lot to do with it.
So here Garrett makes the claim once again that because the problem isn't caused by feminism, therefore feminism somehow can't be making it worse. Now, I would agree with him that the prison situation is not caused by feminism. But we do have feminist groups who are trying to actively shut down female prisons. Apparently when a man commits a crime, he deserves to go off to prison and to go through whatever hell he goes through in prison. But when a woman commits a crime, well, it's unfair to put her in prison. Now, I'm not going to go into this in too much depth here because I want to save it for next episode when we talk about the sentencing gap. But basically the core problem here is gynocentrism. It's where we see the need to protect women, but we see men as disposable. This is also the problem with the previous point Garrett made about men being the main victims of violence. Once again, as society, not just women, not just feminists, but as a society, we see the need to protect women, and we see men as disposable. And Garrett finishes the segment with, real problem. Conditions in most prisons are unacceptably bad, and it disproportionately affects men. Yeah, I would agree with this. Once again, I will go into the feminist groups who are trying to shut down female prisons because apparently it's unfair to send a convicted woman to prison. I'll go into that in much more depth next episode. But for now, on to Garrett's next talking point.
Selective service refers to the fact that the military draft only applies to men. The term is used either as a reference to the Selective Service Act of 1917 or the Selective Service System, which I will elaborate on shortly. MRAs suggest that either the draft should be abolished or it should include women. The problem with this is that the draft is not currently in use in most of the world's nations, especially the big population bases. With regard to the United States specifically, there is currently no conscription, but people will point to the Selective Service System, which requires registration with the military at the age of 18 for all men. However, this is not a military draft, and all it really means is that one could potentially be reinstated at some point. The likelihood of this happening is low, It cannot be entirely ruled out, of course, but equally it cannot be said to be even remotely likely. While there is no draft in use, it is pointless to campaign against it. If and when it comes back into use, then I will be fighting alongside the MRAs in opposing it. Until then, let's talk about more pressing concerns, of which there are many.
Look, I would agree with Garrett that there are more immediate concerns that we should be talking about. Which is why I usually only bring up the draft if I'm responding to someone, like I'm responding to Garrett now, or if I'm talking about it in a historical sense where male suffrage was actually linked to the draft and the expectation that males go off to fight if there is a war, and female suffrage was not linked to this same responsibility. And that's kind of the point with the draft. It is a clear example of an expectation which is put on men, which is not put on women in society. And once again, this can be tied back to what I've been bringing up this entire video, that women are a protected class and men are a disposable class.
As a side note, when the Selective Service Act was passed in the United States Congress in 1917, there was one woman in Congress, a suffragette named Jeanette Rankin, who was the first ever Congresswoman in the United States. She opposed the Selective Service Act and opposed the US entry into the First World War. She was also a campaigner for women's rights. Just pointing out that feminism and women in general played no part in the cause of this problem.
No, the cause is a gynocentric society. So society wants to protect women but sees men as disposable. Now, traditionally, society has had a dynamic where women had less autonomy but a higher level of protection, and men had a higher level of autonomy and less protection. In fact, men were seen as disposable. This can all be tied back to the reproductive bottleneck that women have. For example, they can only have one pregnancy at a time, whereas men can father numerous children within 9 months. So society can survive with less men, as far as reproduction is concerned, than women. Now, jump ahead to the modern age, and women are demanding the same level of autonomy, and guess what? I agree with them. Women should have the same level of autonomy. But what comes with that is the same level of disposability that men have. Right? That's equality. You can't have the equal level of autonomy with men, but demand the same level of protection that you formerly had under the old system. That's not equality. And the reproduction bottleneck that women have, which caused this to begin with, is no longer a concern because of modern technology and because people are living longer and because we've got clean drinking water and an abundance of food, at least in the West. We have a large population base. So people don't need to reproduce at such a high level that they used to. In fact, many people, like myself, choose not to have children, and that's perfectly fine in the modern age. So the standards that once applied no longer apply in the modern age. That's fantastic. I agree with this. I support this 100%. Except our attitudes towards male disposability are exactly the same. Our attitudes towards male disposability are from the previous system. They haven't updated themselves. And feminism is built upon this. Feminism is built upon the protection of women and the demonization or disposability of men. And this is not equality, okay? If males and females have the same level of autonomy, then they need the same level of protection as well. You can't be equal if you demand more protection. So that means we need to acknowledge male victims of violence and domestic violence and sexual abuse, right? We need to give them recognition, not make fun of them, not demonize them, not dismiss them, not pretend they don't exist, but we need to give them equal acknowledgement. We need to give them equal time and equal resources. That means when men and women commit crimes, they should get equal punishment. That means if we're going to have a draft, then both men and women should be included in that. Now, I know there's a physical difference between most men and women. I know physically, practically, men on average would make better, more capable soldiers, but that doesn't mean there aren't other jobs in the military that can be done by women. Not every job in the military is a frontline infantry soldier. And with the way technology is advancing, with some of these exoskeletons that may be in use in, who knows, 10, 20 years, it's possible that that might not even be a factor. But the point is, you can't demand to have the same level of autonomy as men, yet still demand the same level of protection that you had under the old system. That is not equality.
Look, we have to go back to the fact that it was my generation, the 60s generation, that broke all the rules. When I was in high school in the early 60s, we were protected as young women. We were expected to be virgins. Only tramps went to bed with the young guys, right? Now, in college, we're the ones who said to the campuses, get out of our sex lives. We were imprisoned in all-women dorms. We had to be in 11 o'clock at night and sign in. We said, let us make our own mistakes. They said, it is dangerous. You will be raped. We said, the price of freedom is risking rape. Now, what's happened today is that young women have inherited the freedoms that my generation won, but they do not realize that with that freedom come risks and responsibilities.
The price of greater freedom is risk. It really is that simple. And the price of greater protection is restriction. Now, unfortunately, you can't have greater freedom and greater protection at the same time. Feminists tend to not understand this. It seems to be a foreign concept to them. Well, that is feminists with the exception of Camille there. She seems to get it. She seems to understand how this works. I'm guessing Garrett probably wouldn't be a fan of hers, but who knows. Anyway, speaking of Garrett, on to his last point. So for the last 20 or so years, I've been opposed to the death penalty for a couple of reasons. The first one is ethical. I don't believe society should say that killing someone is wrong and then turn around and kill someone when there are clear alternatives to doing that. It's obviously hypocritical. And the second one is the fact that the system isn't perfect, and there are people who are in fact innocent who will be convicted despite the fact they're innocent. Now, it's bad enough if these people spend 10, 20 years behind bars before they prove their innocence. That's bad enough. But if they're actually killed by the state, that really is unforgivable, and there is really no coming back from that, is there? So as someone who has been outspoken against the death penalty for decades now, I've had numerous conversations with people who are pro-death penalty, and the one argument that always seems to come up, in fact, I'm fairly certain has come up every single time I have discussed the death penalty with someone. The one argument that constantly comes up is, how would you feel if your mother, wife, girlfriend, sister, second female cousin, twice removed, whatever, always a female though, how would you feel if that female relative / acquaintance was raped or murdered? Wouldn't you feel like killing the person responsible? And to be perfectly honest, if I was put in that situation, yes, I would feel like killing them. It wouldn't make it ethical to do so. It wouldn't make it right to do so. And I don't think the system should be based on someone's feelings when they've gone through something like that. If someone cuts you off in traffic, you might feel like smashing their windscreen with a baseball bat. That doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. But the point is, it's never brought up how would you feel if your father, son, brother, male best friend, whatever, in other words, a male relative / acquaintance, were killed. That I don't think in the 2+ decades I've been talking about the death penalty, that has ever been brought up once. It is always a female used as an example. And I think this is fairly telling. I'm not talking about discussing the death penalty with feminists, by the way. I'm talking about just people in general. Just your average person in society who I happen to have come across or talked to online or wherever. It is always a female victim which is brought up to elicit an emotional response. What does that tell you about society? And we can have a look at Garrett's list of things he's talking about in his video that I'm responding to. Domestic violence, for example. Society takes domestic violence towards women very serious. Yet, when it comes to domestic violence against men, a large portion of society just doesn't accept that it happens. Or they just don't care. Or they just don't take it serious. It's this diminish and dismiss attitude. And this is reflected in the legal system. We see this with concerns towards violence and murder. Once again, males are the main victims of these crimes, yet society's concerns seem to be focused on female victims. Not people in general or males who make up the majority, but females who make up the minority of victims. We see it with female genital mutilation and male genital mutilation. Female genital mutilation is banned throughout the West and most people are horrified by it. Yet male genital mutilation is performed routinely in hospitals, legally. We see this in the sentencing gap, where men get longer sentences for the exact same crimes. We see it in prisons, where apparently we're trying to shut down women's prisons because it's apparently unethical to put female criminals in prison. It's perfectly fine to do it with males, but apparently doing that to women is unethical. We shouldn't do that to women, apparently. Now, if the argument was maybe smaller crimes, lesser crimes that don't really hurt someone, maybe those crimes, maybe like possession of marijuana or something, for example, maybe those crimes shouldn't have a jail sentence, maybe it should be home detention or something like that. Yeah, that would be a fair argument that we could have. We could discuss that. But to only focus on one group of people based on their gender is sheer lunacy. It's hypocrisy. It's not equality. And we see this time and time again in society. We see it constantly. Attitudes towards harmful things towards men are very, very different than attitudes towards harmful things towards females.
Will you do that again? So I can track you down again? So I can find you again? What if I did? Sit there. Sit there. It really hurts. Stop.
We've seen what people do when a woman is abused by a man.
Stop. Sit there. Stop. Sit there.
You look like a psychotic person.
But we wondered, what would happen if we reversed the sexes? What if the victim were a man and the abuser a woman?
Huh? You want to start with me? You're an ass.
This time she plays the aggressor, verbally and physically abusing her boyfriend.
How's that? How's that?
Women abusing, even assaulting their male partners. Not as isolated as you might think.
I hate you!
From Moonstruck to Shakespeare in Love to Pirates of the Caribbean, women hitting men may be a Hollywood staple, but it's not just in the movies. Major League pitcher Chuck Finley's wife, actress Tawny Kitaen, was arrested and briefly jailed after he accused her of pummeling him. She denied it and charges were dropped, but only after she agreed to attend anger management classes. Again, psychology professor Carrie Keating.
It is a big problem in this country. Men create more damage, but women hit more than men do.
Every year, there are more than 800,000 serious cases of women abusing men.
Again, nothing.
But confronted with this, what will people do when hidden cameras are rolling and our actress is out of control?
No.
One after another, people pass by and keep right on going. What will this woman do? At first, she seems to ignore the fight, but pauses a few paces down the path to watch. She tells us she didn't think this woman could pose any real physical threat.
It didn't look like any harm was being done. I didn't immediately think to protect the man at all.
But now we're about to meet a woman whose reaction is instant, visceral. Watch closely.
No, get up. No.
Why don't you calm down?
What went through her mind?
Good for her. You go, girl.
Linda McCluthie just assumed he had it coming to him. But why?
Maybe she caught him cheating or something like that, really bad, and that made her lose it.
We've seen it before, back when we taped our first experiment with that abusive boyfriend. We told our actors to trade places for just one take.
Tell me right now. Why?
And later brought bystanders together to talk about what they'd seen.
My first thought was that he must have cheated on her.
I was thinking that same thing.
But you don't know that.
You don't, but
You look guilty.
exactly.
And now, over and over again, when the victim is a man, so many women perceive him as guilty.
I figured, well, he probably deserved it.
Linda seems to think our feisty actress is a kind of role model.
I was thinking, I'm pretty nice all the time. I should have done what she did sometimes.
But what about this guy?
You know what? Just Nate, come on!
Come on, what?
Whose side is he
You
on?
haven't said a freaking word to me about it.
We watch and record for hours and hours as 163 people just walk or jog right by.
Look at how many people went by without defending that guy. And this is kind of classic because female aggression is usually seen as not very important, not very deadly, nothing really to react to.
But just maybe things are about to change. Watch these women as they gather at a safe distance and map out a strategy. Now, one of them approaches.
Everyone wants to call the cops on you guys.
Excuse me?
Everyone wants to call the cops. You're not going to say anything?
It's actually, like, none of your business, so can you excuse me?
Oh, sorry. Well, if you need help, we'll help.
But when she retreats, they go at it again.
Look at me! Nate, stop ignoring me! What the? You're not even... Look, Nate! Hello!
And that's all it takes. This woman calls 911.
911, where's your emergency?
There's two people fighting on a bench. She's like beating them up. I was wondering if somebody could come just check it out.
But what would a cop do when a woman is abusing a man?
Self-centered.
Hi, guys. Why not call 911?
What they would have, they would just have a little tiff. It'd be all right.
I find it upsetting. I would find it more upsetting if he were putting his hands on her.
If you're wondering why they didn't call 911, well, he's a cop.
If it had been the man...
Oh, without a doubt.
You would have stepped in.
Yeah. It's called old-fashioned views.
It's a double standard.
It is. What can I tell you? I mean, if you're raised the way I was raised, you don't put your hands on it, right?
So what should you do if you see something like that?
Every individual has to do their own calculus when it comes to whether or not they should step in and help.
For these women, the calculus was simple.
The physical abuse, the verbal abuse, you shouldn't be hitting one another. I was concerned for both their safety.
And these women tell us the fact that the abuser is a woman makes no difference.
That is not an answer!
What matters is that someone needed help.
There's also a risk to not helping. And when we fail to help in a situation, it doesn't make us feel very good about ourselves.
I'd rather do the right thing than walk away and go home and regret it.
So throughout his video, Garrett has been making the point that this issue is not the problem of women, or not caused by women, or this issue is not caused by feminism. And you know what? He is right. The vast majority of these issues that we bring up are not caused by just women, or are not caused by feminism. They are societal issues. They are attitudes which are outdated, which are wrong, which rely on gender roles and gender stereotypes. And although feminism does not cause the vast majority of these issues, it does amplify them. Now, apparently feminism is meant to be against gender roles, and they are actually against some gender roles. Yet the movement reinforces others. This attitude that women need to be protected, need to be the protected class, and harm towards men, or issues that men have, need to be ignored, is really one of the cornerstones of feminism. We see it time and again in feminist literature, in feminist talking points. We see it in attitudes towards domestic violence, where if a woman commits domestic violence towards a man, it is excused as, well, she must have had a reason for doing it. It must be self-defense. We see it when it comes to circumcision. Yes, the majority of feminists say that they're against male circumcision, but then they usually follow it up by diminishing and dismissing it, by saying, well, yes, it's bad, but it's nothing like female genital mutilation, so we should just focus on that. Instead of saying we should just ban all genital mutilation, male or female, which is performed on anyone under the age of consent, where there is not a clear medical need for it. That would be the logical argument, wouldn't it? To just say outright all of it is bad. Instead of that, it becomes a competition over which one is worse. And then apparently we're only allowed to focus on the worst case. And this is after they admit that it is a violation of human rights, and it is unethical, and it is wrong. We see it in the sentencing gap, where I've actually had feminists say to me before that the sentencing gap is an example of a male privilege. I know, crazy, right? That men get longer sentences for exactly the same crimes is somehow seen as a fucking privilege. And the way they justify this is they say that apparently women are seen as weaker by the court systems. They're seen as less capable of committing violent or horrific crimes. And therefore this is discrimination against women. Of course, a more logical, sane way to look at this would be that the court system has a negative bias towards men, and it sees men as being more violent, more animalistic, more cruel, more capable of doing harm. But apparently that's a privilege, somehow. We see it in the family court system, where an abusive mother is more likely to get custody of her children than a loving father. Once again, supported by feminism. Not created by feminism, but supported by feminism, amplified by feminism. We see it in statistics on the homeless, where the vast majority of the homeless are men, yet throughout cities in the Western world, women have special services. There are special services for the minority based on gender. When it comes to females who are homeless, society has a concern. When it comes to males who are homeless, well, it must somehow be their own fault, right? Time and time again, we see feminism reinforce this set of gender stereotypes, where we need to have special concern for those issues that affect women. Yet we need to ignore those issues that affect men. And whenever men try to talk about their issues, what do we get? We get feminists, popular feminists, influential feminists, holding up drinking male tears cups or wearing drinking male tears t-shirts. We get shaming language, which is designed to make us shut up and go away. We're called whining, crying man babies. We're told that we're really the privileged class and that our issues don't count. We're told that we should be more concerned about female issues and only concerned with female issues, and that we already have it so fucking great that we're just whinging over nothing. And then they tell us that this is equality. Now, I'm looking forward to the day I don't have to call myself a men's rights activist. I would be happy to live in a world where I can just call myself an egalitarian and that's it, where I don't have to point out to people that men's rights issues are ignored. I'd love to live in a society where we actually acknowledge that men have issues too, and as a society we do something about it. We acknowledge men's pain, we acknowledge men's issues, and we actually give a shit about it. Okay? That's the world I would like to live in. And that's a world where I wouldn't need to call myself an MRA anymore. I could just be an egalitarian and that's it. But we don't live in that world. We live in a world where we're hypersensitive to female issues and female pain, and we're blind to male issues and male pain. This isn't caused by feminism, but it is amplified by feminists and feminist attitudes.
Because, of course, not only do we have International Women's Day, we also have women and equality questions every month in the Chamber, which we don't have for men. So the opportunity for men to raise issues that are important to them is very limited. And just to give you a flavour, Mr. Chairman, of the type of things that may come up and which will be part of International Men's Day, I'm not entirely sure why it's so humorous, but to discuss issues such as men's shorter life expectancy, wider male health issues, many of which go unreported through embarrassment of men to sort of go along and talk about these things, the high suicide rate amongst men, the propensity for violence against men. There's many male victims of domestic violence, again, as something that goes very much unreported because of lots of embarrassment about it. The underachievement of boys in education compared to girls, the issues around father-child relationships, and often the way that fathers sometimes feel they don't get a fair crack of the whip in terms of custody of their children and things like that. These are all issues that affect an awful lot of people around the country, whether people agree with some people's views or not. I think it's important that the House of Commons debates these issues. I think people can recognise that they are all very real issues for many people in the country, and so in the spirit of gender equality, given that we have the debate each year on International Women's Day, which I suspect will continue under this committee, I thought it would only be fair that we had an opportunity to debate these issues under the flag of International Men's Day, which is this year on Thursday the 19th of November.
Thank you very much. Questions? Jess?
You have to excuse me for laughing, that the idea that men don't have the opportunity to ask questions in this place is a frankly laughable thing. As I say, as the only woman on this committee, it seems like every day to me is.
Well, I wasn't making, with respect, I wasn't making that point. I wasn't making the point that men don't have an opportunity to ask. I was about men's issues. There's a very big difference between men raising issues and the raising of men's issues.
But one could raise men's issues in any single one of the question sessions. So men's health, absolutely. So prostate cancer, that could be raised in men's questions, couldn't it?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I very much look forward to these arguments being deployed when we come to consider a debate on International Women's Day, because exactly the same arguments could be raised for International Women's Day, that women's health issues, that equality issues could be raised in women and equality questions in other forms. So all I ask is for an equal crack of the whip, that if those issues can be raised without having a debate on International Men's Day, then obviously the same issues can apply for when it comes to International Women's Day, but those arguments have never won the day before this committee.
I just think that it's worth pointing out the idea that this this chamber, that these houses, both of them, in any way reflect gender equality is to me a frankly laughable thing. And so in the fight for equality, I'm not sure the men on this list necessarily have that much to fight for.
Bob, please.
Yeah, I can empathise with a lot of the issues that you're concerned about. I mean, I think many people would say that people don't talk about testicular cancer or prostate cancer for fear of embarrassment. So that's quite clearly an issue that needs a lot more public debate. My concern is the balance of debate. On the list of potential speakers,
all men.
The fact that they're all men doesn't matter so much.
So this gynocentric brick wall is one of the barriers which is stopping men's rights actually getting solved and something getting done. This concern over the protection of women, but not the same concern for the protection of men or the welfare of men, is a major issue. It is the main thing which is causing men's issues and preventing men's issues being solved. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of debate over whether this is biological or societal or whatever. I personally think there are probably elements of both in there. But this attitude, this societal attitude, is something that feminism has taken advantage of and is one of the key reasons that feminism has been so successful. It's a very common tactic for feminists to equate women as a group with feminists as a group. Now, they don't do this, obviously, with men's rights activists. If a feminist is arguing against the men's rights movement, that isn't seen as hating all men, even though some feminists come out and clearly say that they do. But just your normal average feminist arguing against the men's rights movement, criticising the men's rights movement, that isn't seen as hating all men. But when the opposite happens, when a men's rights activist criticises the feminist movement or the feminist ideology which they disagree with, or the actions or words of a particular feminist, it is more often than not rephrased and reinterpreted as being anti-woman.
My message to the men's rights movement for 2016 is, get your shit together. Really focus. I think if you just really focused on the actual things that are important to men, that would really help you, and it would help me, and it would help everybody. Because I'm a man, and I don't want to fall behind in the world. I don't want other men to struggle at school. I don't want other men to go to prison. I want men to have good lives. So I think if the men's rights movement actually took a page from feminism and decided, you know what, our goal here is equality. It's not about tearing down women. It's not about puffing up our own egos. It's about those actual issues which really do matter to men. Because as a man, these things matter to me. I care about things that happen to men. Other men should care about things that happen to men. It's natural. But this movement seems based in a large part about being angry at women and pissed off at them achieving things in life and them getting equality. When I see a woman get an opportunity in life, I do not feel jealous and I do not feel angry. However, I might feel that if I am persecuted or discriminated against, that I would like the opportunity to overcome that persecution and have that persecution taken on by a group which would help me, instead of a bunch of dudes sitting around being like, fuck women, women suck, women are bitches, women are terrible. Well, my mother's a woman, my sister's a woman, my girlfriend's a woman, people are women, and I have no problem with that. I'm not forced to associate with any women. I just want to have men be given opportunities in life. That's it, you know? And by that token, I would be a men's rights activist. So, me, as a person who emphasizes with feminism, apparently I care more about men's issues than men's rights activists who are just pissed off that their fucking marriage didn't work out. Well, I got bad news, marriages don't work out. That they didn't get their kids, that they were angry at their wife or whatever, and it turned out bad. So My advice that you probably don't want or need, actually you probably do need it, just thinking about it, is care about men's issues more. Don't worry about women, you know? Yeah, I mean, we want women to have rights, and I feel like men's rights activists should care about equality in the same fashion that feminists do, or at least say that they care about equality. So emphasize equality, emphasize the problems that face men, because I would appreciate it, and I think all men would appreciate that.
The thing is, criticizing feminist ideology does not mean that we hate women. This is what we like to call a straw man, or a big steaming pile of bullshit, maybe would be a better description. But probably the funniest example of this type of thing I've ever seen was from Jenny McDermott. Now, I'm about to play the clip. I ask you all to listen very, very closely to exactly what Jenny says. If you pick what she says, it is fucking hilarious. So please listen very, very closely.
For one, they're YouTubers with larger channels who have a ton of influence, and they use this platform to attack women like Rebecca Watson, Anita Sarkeesian, Lacey Green, Marina Shut Up, Zenistrad One, Ryan Wiley, Kevin Logan.
Did you pick that up? I have to wonder if Kevin Logan is aware that he's a woman. Now, clearly, woman was not the appropriate word there, Jenny. Clearly what she meant was feminist, because everyone on that list was a feminist. Every single one of them was a feminist. That's what they had in common. Yet, she chose to use the word women, and then went ahead and listed 3 men. And that's because, and I don't know if she did this consciously or subconsciously. I'm guessing she did it subconsciously. But the reason why is because using the word women is more likely to get you sympathy than using the word feminist. It's fair and reasonable to criticize an ideology like feminism. It's a belief system, after all. It's a worldview, right? But if you rephrase it, so we're not really talking about feminists, we're actually talking about women as a group, well, then the need to protect kicks in most people, both men and women. And it's a very, very strong influence, one that feminism has been taking advantage of for a very fucking long time. Now, just before I finish, let me play you some very wise words of wisdom from a Mr. Tom Golden.
A man's pain is taboo. A man's pain is taboo. You've heard speakers all day today talk about that in certain ways, but a man's pain is taboo. No one wants to touch it. No one wants to hear it. And men are not dumb. They know that. So what are they going to do? Go emote in public? No. They know their pain is taboo. Now, let's do an exercise. I want you to imagine that you're walking into your favorite restaurant. You're walking in your favorite restaurant, and you're walking in to get seated, you're thinking, and you look over in the corner, at the corner table, there's a woman. She's crying. What's the first thing you think about with her? Anybody? What's wrong? Poor dear, she's upset, right? I've asked this question to thousands of therapists in the workshops I give. I'm telling you, they all say the same thing. Poor dear. She must have just broken up with someone. She needs support. How can I help, right? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Erase that image. Go back. You're walking into the same restaurant. You're walking by and you notice over in that corner table there's a guy and he's crying. What's your first reaction? Get away. Wimp. What else? Drunk. Exactly. This is what I hear over and over again. People immediately come up with that. I came up with that, and I was working with them. You know, this is not something that is just a couple of people. This is almost all of us have this bias that's built in that says, man's pain, get away. There's something wrong with that guy. He's probably drunk. You know, so we're all built to not want to get close to men's pain. Men know this. They know it. They know no one wants to hear this crap. In fact, the guys I'd sit with, they'd look at me and they'd say, do you really want to hear this? They couldn't believe that someone would want to listen to their pain. It's sad. So the first thing that tipped me off was that men's pain is invisible because a man's pain is taboo. Now there's another one. The provide and protect rule. Oh boy. So you provide and protect people. Well, guess what? Who's providing and protecting for you? Nobody. Nobody. Nobody's providing and protecting. Think about, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you and your wife wake up, there's a big noise down in the basement. Boom, something goes. Who's going down to check it out?
Not me.
That's a woman said that. Who's going down to check it out? Guess what? In today's world, women may very well say, I'll go down and check that out. And if she did that, she'd be a hero, right? But women's roles are very flexible these days. She'd not only be a hero, but if she said, honey, I really don't want to do that, can you go? It'd be fine. Nobody get upset, right? There's no problem. Now, how about the guy? If he goes down and checks it out, he's doing his job. Right? That's what he's supposed to do. He is the guy. But if he says, no, honey, I don't want to go, he's a jackass. Can you see the double standard that's going on? Men are expected to never be dependent. Never be dependent. And guess what? You can't emote and not be dependent. The two are linked. They're linked up. So men strive to not be dependent for good reasons, because the culture whips them into that. There's a guy named Peter Marin. He wrote this beautiful piece on homelessness and men. But one of the things in the piece stuck with me. And he talked about men and dependency. And listen to what he says. To put it simply, men are neither supposed nor allowed to be dependent. Men are not supposed to be or allowed to be dependent. They're expected to take care of others and themselves. And when they cannot or will not do it, then the assumption at the heart of the culture is that they are somehow less than men and therefore unworthy of help. Get it? An irony asserts itself. By being in need of help, men forfeit the right to it. Does that make sense? A guy comes out and he says, I don't need that help. I'm fine. I'm a man, right? Hey, no problem. He doesn't get the help. But if a guy comes out and he says, you know, I really need some help today, people automatically have a view of him. There's something wrong with that guy, right? He doesn't deserve this help. It's a very powerful double standard that goes on for men that keeps them, again, from wanting to emote in public, wanting to bring it out so people can see it. Very different. Now,
yeah, no, I'll try and see you on Thursday and then get the...
What do I do? What?
Just keep doing it. They're annoying.
What?
2 fucking o'clock. Come here.
Get your hand off me.
Come here.
What?
Where were you?
I'm not talking to you about this. I'm not talking to you. Get your hand off me.
Who was there?
Get your hand off me.
Who was there? Tell me who was there.
People are looking at us.
I swear to God, I swear to God.
People are looking at us. Will you get your hand off me? Stop there. People are looking at us. What's wrong with you?
Honestly, we're fine.
Grant, thanks. Okay, because someone will call the police if you carry on doing that to someone.
Okay.
Because if I don't, someone else will.
Okay. It's perfectly fine.
You don't have to put up with that, honey. Okay. Thank you.
My office is there. You're definitely right.
Yeah, I am.
Problems just come and knock.
I'm Grant, thanks. What do I do? What? Do you ever listen to me?
Chrissy, stop. You're crazy,
I'm
man.
manic. I've been talking at you for the last 10 minutes and you haven't listened. You haven't gotten into fucking what I've been saying to you. But you're fucking not even listening to me. That's what. Why do I push you like that? Because you won't fucking respond to me about any. You won't listen to me. You think you're fucking all manly.
I wasn't.
No, you can't be. No, you can't be. Don't try and fucking walk away. Stop. Listen to me when I'm talking. Don't try and fucking walk away from me. Stop it. Was it fucking bullshit? want this fucking bullshit.
What the fuck is wrong with you?
What the fuck's wrong with me? There's nothing. Don't give me that shit, okay? Pathetic. You're so fucking pathetic.